Hi everyone, it's Bradley the Singing Chef, and today I am so excited to share this next recipe with y'all of you. This recipe is near and dear to my heart because it's my mom's. It's my mom's apple crumb pie. Now this is like my version of dessert comfort food because this is a recipe that my mom would pull out when I was a kid, when we had company coming over. It's pretty easy to assemble, to be honest, and but the flavor and the smell of your kitchen while this is baking is like no other. You're going to love this dessert. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is get started on the filling for the apple pie. Now, I've already been working a little bit on coring, peeling, and chopping up some Granny Smith apples. I prefer Granny Smiths. You can use other apples. I just think that the tartness of a Granny Smith goes well against the sugar that's in the filling for the pie. So I've already done that with about 5 or so apples. These are pretty small Granny Smiths, as you can see. So it's going to take me at least these 6 to, I think, fill the pie. If your apples are a little bit larger, you may want to adjust that. I would say between 4 and 6, depending on how large the apple is. Okay, so we've got to peel the apple first. Won't be much singing today for the singing chef. My allergies here in Florida are kicking today. All right, now you could use an apple core, which I own, but I am not a big fan of washing an extra thing, so I just use my regular old kitchen butcher knife to cut around the core of each of these apples. And honestly, as long as you get close to that core in the center, you've gotten the majority of the apple off that you're going to need for the pie, and then you just toss the core away, and then you haven't had to dirty your fancy schmancy core. So I'm going to chop these into pretty small pieces. And then we will be good to go with the apple content of Mom's pie. At least the start of it anyway. All right, simple chop. Perfect. Okay, now to these apples, I'm gonna add a few ingredients, okay? The first thing I'm gonna add is a 1/2 cup of sugar. So there's a 1/4 and a 1/2. And then I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Of course, apples and cinnamon are a match made in heaven. Let's see, there's my 1/4. So there's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Now, there's a couple things that Mom's initial recipe didn't call for, but I find that I like these things added to it. I'm going to do a pinch of salt to that mixture. And then this is my other secret weapon that I added to the recipe. That's cornstarch. So when these apples cook in your pie, they're going to release a lot of liquid. And so in order to combat that making your crust just completely, soggy or fall apart, or at least help that effort, I'm going to add some cornstarch. So I'm going to take about 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and add that to the filling mixture. Then I'm just going to give that a good toss so that the sugar and the cinnamon and the cornstarch get on all of those that's looking good. It already smells good and it's not even cooked yet. Oh my goodness. All right, and that's how simple that filling is. Like, that's all you gotta do. So I'm gonna set that aside and I'm gonna work on, this is my garbage bowl that has my peels in it. I'm gonna work on my pie crust. So you've got options here. You can make a homemade pie crust, which I sometimes do, or you can use your pre-bought, pre-made pie crust that's that you would have in your freezer or refrigerator section in your grocery store. Just make sure that it's, you know, thawed out if you've had it frozen. If it's this rollout kind. Or you can use just a frozen pie crust from the frozen section, and it doesn't even have to be thawed, and it still works. So that's why I say, if you have unexpected company coming over to your house, you could, if you've got a pie shell, some apples, and some simple basic pantry ingredients, you could throw this dessert together really quick, get it in the oven, and it will be good to go. All right, so here in my pie plate, I'm gonna make sure that my pie crust is large enough for my pie plate. So I'm gonna dust my surface with a little bit of flour. Make sure when I roll this out, it is large enough to fit on my pie plate. All right, that's gonna need a little bit of work. So I'm gonna work on rolling out this pie dough a little bit farther than the circumference of the pie plate, and I'll be right back. All right guys, we are back. So I dusted a little bit of flour on my pie crust. I've been rolling it out from the center to not only get it a little bit thinner, but also to make sure that it is large enough for my pie plate. All right, that is pretty good shape. So all I'm gonna do is take that pie crust, put it in the center of the plate, and gently, with the back side of my hand, get it up against the edges of the pie plate. Right. Now, I'm going to do a very simple border on my pie. All I'm going to do is fold over any excess, which there's not much, all the way around the plate. Great. And then, once I get that folded over, all I'm going to do is take a fork and crimp around the edge. Should not take any time at all. Like I said, with this pre-made pie dough, you've cut your work in half. You can certainly make your own pie dough or use that frozen crust. But I find that this is one of the simplest ways. Again, just make sure that it's down against your plate, and you should be good to go. As you can hear, that was my oven going off. I preheated that to 400 degrees, so when the pie is assembled, it is ready to go. All right, now just set that aside, and we're gonna work on layer 3. So we've got our filling, we've got our crust. The next thing for Mom's apple crumb pie would be the crumb part. And that is a really simple, it's sort of the basics, sort of a streusel crumb that we're gonna cover all over the top of this pie. Okay, for that, I'm going to need 1/3 of a cup of sugar, to a small mixing bowl, and 3/4 a cup of all-purpose flour. There's 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4. Now, To that, I actually like to put in a dash of cinnamon, and again, a tiny little sprinkle of salt. You're probably going to learn about this about me. I love salty and sweet against each other in desserts. I don't have the largest sweet tooth in the world, so anything I can do to just lessen the sweetness is just a tiny bit, like I did with my brown butter chocolate chip cookies that were in the earlier recipe. I like that. So I'm going to get those dry ingredients incorporated, the sugar, the cinnamon, just with a fork. And then the last ingredient is my favorite B word in the world, butter. We are going to add around 6 tablespoons of butter that has been softened to room temperature, okay? You don't want it to be melted, and you don't want it to be completely refrigerator hard. So I'm just going to take this and throw it in there sort of 2 or 3 tablespoons at a time. It's about 6 tablespoons. And then all you have to do is take your fork or your hands if you want to and just mash that butter into the dry ingredients that are in your bowl until they are all incorporated into a beautiful streusel kind of crumble. It does not take long at all once you see that butter's getting broken up by the fork tongs. That's why I use the fork instead of my hands for once to make this. Just kind of making sure that I'm making sure all those butter pieces get chopped up and incorporated into those dry ingredients, the sugar and the flour, cinnamon, pinch of salt. Alrighty, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to show you guys sort of the consistency. It should sort of look like wet sand. So, you know, kind of crumbly in texture in there. All right, so now it is assembly time. We've got our crust, we've taken care of that. Our oven is preheated and ready to go. Our apple filling has been sitting to the side, coated in that cornstarch, sugar, and cinnamon. We're just gonna pour all of that goodness into, you already see in your bowl probably that the apples have released a little bit of that liquid that I referred to earlier. We're going to put all of that filling into the prepared pie dish. And on top of that, we're just going to dump all of this crumb topping evenly over the top of your pie. You just want to make sure that you spread the crumb out enough to go over all of that apple filling as much as you possibly can. Great, it's in great shape. Don't want to waste that little bit that was on my fork. Great. So now that it's all assembled, like I said, it's going to go in your 400-degree preheated oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. Just keep an eye on it. Once you see that crumb topping gets a little bit golden brown all over the top and the edge of your crust is brown, it should be good to go. All right, so I'm going to pop this baby in the oven and we will have some delicious Mom's Apple Crumb Pie. Hey y'all, it's Bradley the Singing Chef and we are back. My Mom's Apple Crumb Pie has just come out of the oven and this place smells heavenly. I mean, so good. So I wanted to tell you guys, so with this one I actually used a refrigerated pie dough and it actually cooked a little bit faster than my mom's recipe. I think that typically she used frozen pie shells, so this took a little bit less time. Only took about a half an hour in the oven. I just kept an eye on it to make sure that the crimped edge of the pie dough wasn't getting too brown, and it almost started going there, so I pulled it out at about 30 minutes, so you may want to watch that as well. All right, I'm going in and getting a slice. may not come out perfect, but it's going in my mouth perfect. Can I get an amen? Ooh. All right, I didn't get all of it. I'm going back for the rest. Oh, yes. Oh my goodness gracious. The cornstarch really does help soak up some of that juice. You may still have a little bit come out when you slice into the pie, but I've got to show this to you. I mean, come on. Maybe some vanilla ice cream on the side, or as is. True confessions, I have had this for breakfast. Come on, it's like an apple turnover. It's allowed. Don't judge. All right, I gotta have it. Yes. What I love about this is that, you know, with those chunks of the apple and only about a half an hour, 35 minutes, depending on your pie crust, there's still a little bit of bite to the apple. So it's not all just mush inside the pie. And that sweet, sweet crumb topping is just the deal. I mean, I don't care what kind of crust you put on this pie, it's gonna work, but it's the topping, to me, that I could just sort of scrape off and eat with a spoon because it's so good. Apple, cinnamon, sugar, butter. What is not to love in this pie? I hope you will try making this yourself. Thank you so much for joining me again on Bradley the Singing Chef. I wish you lots of good food, love, laughter, music, and apple pie. Enjoy.